Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project webinar. My name is Brittany Boston, and I am the Associate Director with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. And also on the call is Amy Julian, who I will let introduce herself here before I jump too far into housekeeping.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Julian. I'm the director for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support here at Illinois State University, and we are the project leads for the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project.
So for today's webinar, as participants, you are in listen-only mode. However, we do want to hear your questions, comments, concerns. And so there's a couple of ways that you can go about sharing those with us. You can either use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your toolbar, or you are able to utilize the chat as well. And so if you see that 2 with the drop down, you can either chat with hosts and panelists, which will just come directly to myself and Amy, or you can chat with everyone that is attending the webinar today. And so feel free to put those questions, comments into the chat throughout today's presentation, and we will address them when we are able to. This session is also being recorded, and so if you have to hop off for other responsibilities, or if you have an individual that you think would find this information useful, we will be posting these to our ATTA website for you to utilize at a later time. Closed captioning is also turned on if that is something that you would like to utilize as well. Again, if you see that little TV screen with the CC, you can hit that at the bottom of your toolbar to turn the closed captioning on. And one other thing that I do want to bring attention to, if you are on our listserv or receive our marketing information for our ATTA projects and webinars, then you should have already gotten this information. But I do want to bring light to it as well. It has come to our attention that our ATTA logo, the imagery of the puzzle pieces, can be problematic and have some negative connotations. And so we just want to make everyone aware that we are in the process of updating this logo, because we do want this project to be very inclusive and equity focused. And we are aware that the puzzle pieces do not express that message. And so we are working on updating this logo, and we'll hopefully have one ready to go very soon.
Excellent. Thank you, Brittany. And so we're just going to dive right in now, as you all saw me there, I was going to go pull it off the next slide, but we're going to leave it on. So wanted to start with what the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project is. So the ATTA project develops, presents resources that assist individuals with autism in their transition from secondary education to post-secondary education or employment. So we are really a niche project when looking at supporting students on the spectrum. ATTA provides training and support to important stakeholders as they work to provide an equitable experience for individuals on the spectrum. And the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project is funded by the Illinois State Board of Education and housed at the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. ICSPS supports and creates supports and delivers professional development for education professionals across Illinois. We provide technical assistance, develop publications, facilitate program improvement strategies for our partners as they relate to college transition, recruitment, retention, and completion, encouraging the achievement of special populations, learners, including individuals with disabilities. ICSPS was founded in 1977 at Illinois State University and is housed in the Educational Administration and Foundations Department of the College of Education. So as we begin today, couple webinar logistics. We often begin any autism-related training with the assumption that the audience has limited knowledge about ASD. The positive of this is that we try to take as much into consideration and we give as much information as possible without being too overwhelming. The negative is that those who do have a good understanding of ASD might feel that they are not being given enough new information. So we're going to really start at this idea of beginning and move our way through. And then please capture any questions to ensure you get clarification by submitting those in the chat, and we will move through the chat as we move through the day. So we'll pause as we go. So some session learner outcomes for our time together today. We're going to recognize when interacting with students with a autism spectrum disorder. We're going to describe the characteristics of a student with ASD and what it might look like in a college setting or in your classroom, and both are applicable. And then we're going to identify strategies that can be used to help autistic students succeed in college or in that transition into post-secondary. So just an overview, and we're going to touch base on this again, but ATTA offers monthly webinars and for secondary and post-secondary teachers, counselors, administrators, and business and community members, and they are focused in different ways. This is really an introduction webinar, so we're really looking at what ATTA is and where you're going to see um, some supports and things for students with autism within your classrooms. And then we also have post-secondary support, which is a link there that we'll be sharing this out after the webinar. So let's start with baseline here. What is ASD? Autism spectrum disorder is a lifelong neurological development disorder that affects how individuals communicate, interact with other people, and how they experience the world around them. With communication differences and understanding using communication language, um, we range from individuals who are highly articulate to others who may be nonverbal. So there is a range when you're looking at that. ASD is a spectrum condition, which means that it affects people in different ways. And one of the things that we often say is that you've met one person with autism, you have met one person with autism because it does have a range of difficulties that individuals, express in different ways. They may experience a different degree in which they might be impacted. ASD can impact communication. It can impact social interactions, understanding social behavior and the feelings of others, which can inform, development of friendships and relationships for that individual. ASD can impact behavior differences and how information is processed and can be rigidly or repetitive movements and can often individuals like to have a strict adherence to routines, rules, and difficulty in planning or winging opportunities. And then there can also be an impact on sensory interest and sensitivity to differences in the way sensory information is processed, often resulting in an under sensitivities and can lead to extreme levels of stress and anxiety, particular for those unfamiliar or presented with an overstimulated environment. So what you might notice in your classroom when a student, and again, I want to note that little right here, this little asterisk part. Every student on the spectrum is unique, and you may or may not see all of these characteristics when interacting with a given student. But some of the things you're going to see in your classroom are that oddities in vocal pitch, annotations, and volume. There might be a display of literal or concrete thinking patterns and literal interpretations of words. They may come across as argumentative and rude when not intending to be. Strong narrow interest may observe ritualistic or repetitive strategies such as rocking or tapping or pacing. And we talk about that in our supports of what are some of the things that we can do as teachers and faculty to give students that opportunity to have that space to possibly pace in the back of the room and having those conversations with them as they come into your classroom. They may be easily distracted, they may become easily overwhelmed, and they may misunderstand tones of voice, jokes, facial expressions, sarcasm, and other subtle messages. There's a couple more here. What you also might notice in your classroom is trouble staying on topic and maintaining conversations. They might have difficulty in changes in the classroom seating and syllabi. So, as I said, many students with autism really do thrive when there is strategy and structure and predictability. And so when we make a change to our syllabus or when we change up the day, that could be stressful for them. They might have, oh, I repeated that one, sorry. They may exhibit awkward eye contact, posture, or gesture, and may have sensory or sensitivity to light. And I will say for neurodivergent individuals or non-neurodivergent individuals, sometimes the lovely neon lights that we have in our offices and classrooms and that buzzing sound they make can be very distracting. And if they're sensory sensitive, that can be a real challenge for them. And they may have difficulty working in groups. So these are some of the things you might notice when you interact with an individual in your classroom. I want to point out some of the strengths. So when you look at individuals on the spectrum, many of them have above average or superior intellect. And a lot of times that is or can be focused in a particular area of expertise or an area that they have really zoned in on. Um, and it is always very fascinating to me working with individuals and the level of detail and just superior intellect they have in particular areas or their passionate areas, most likely. They are definitely out of box thinkers. They have excellent long term and short term memory. Big strength is that they are task oriented and diligent with work routine. Um, Excellent visual spatial skills, which is fantastic. And then another strength is that they are exceptionally talented in one specific area and highly motivated by their interest. So if their interest correlates with what the task is for the class, you're going to have a student that's really going to thrive in your classroom. And they have a strong pursuit of knowledge within areas of interest, passion, commitment to ideas, and they can be very passionate about their ideas, strong attention to detail, and an ability to maintain prolonged intense focus on a subject of interest. So again, if you find their passion, you're going to have a fantastic student or future employee for that matter. And then they really do bring an original way of problem solving. So that is just fantastic to a team dynamic to think about things that, again, that out of the box thinker that we're looking at. Some of the challenges that we have when interacting or having a student with autism in our classrooms are those social interactions and understanding social rules. So you'll want to be prescriptive in those. And we'll get to strategies. I'm trying not to get ahead of myself here. Abstract concepts of seeing the big picture. They do focus on the details and sometimes lose sight of the big picture. You have seeing others' points of view, setting boundaries. We've talked about working in groups, reading social cues and facial expression, body language. That is something that is very common. That idea of not of being very literal in their understanding and not picking up sarcasm. So we try not to use sarcasm when um, addressing and communicating. Multitasking, asking for clarification and assistance. That is often a challenge because of those social interactions and understanding they we have students who don't necessarily always ask for assistance or seek clarification. So that's something that you'll want to do as an instructor, make sure that you're following up with them, and then assess priorities and then regulatory sensory needs. So looking at these, what are some strategies when we have students who are on the spectrum in our classrooms? One of the big things, which I think works for all students, is breaking those large assignments into smaller units to be turned in separately. So if you have a project for your class that is due at the end of the semester, giving them some milestones or touch points where they have certain things that they need to be like, let's say the assignment is for a project that they're going to do a research project, a continuous improvement policy project and then having okay by Thanksgiving you should be at this point by after Christmas break you should be at this like what are those points that they should be so breaking those large assignments into smaller units will really help not only keep all your students on track but also help your individuals who are on the spectrum. Provide direct feedback and set clear boundaries. Again, I'm going to tell you what the strategies. I'm a big universal design person. I think if you've ever heard me present on universal design, a lot of these are interchangeable. So that idea of what works for our students on the spectrum also works for all of our students, providing that direct feedback, setting clear boundaries, explaining to the student when and how you will interact with them. If you are from a college setting, looking at that as well, like what are those office hours that they can come in and engage with you? What are those clear boundaries? Same with the classroom though, as well with the high school setting. Is the best time to ask questions and when are they able to be engaging or engage with the professor or the teacher? Provide ample response time for questions. So one of the things that we find sometimes is that if a class is moving at a quicker pace, you want to add that pause that allows that time for individuals to think about what their responses are. And then what is always very successful is providing a predictable routine. So what is the routine for the day? Having a routine for an individual on the spectrum is really a strong suit, and they're going to follow that routine and be an exemplary student and employee for you. Consider allowing the use of technology or a laptop for classwork and note taking, which I think, again, across the board is very effective. Allow extra transition time if they have things or they have ideas that they need to express or questions, allowing that question time. And then help with organizational supports. So this is something that as a parent you can work with, or as you're looking at, and I do this with my students and my children, and I want them to be thinking about, because I'm a color code person. So that idea of, okay, so math is blue. Do I have my math notebook? And that way, when they're going to their locker in high school, they can pull the math notebook if they have math homework. In college, when they're on their own and they're doing this in their own way, those study skills will transpire over and are very helpful for them. So having that color coded folder, um, looking at ways in which you can support them in asking if they have those things. And again, there's going to be different levels of engagement depending on the level of the student. Some more strategies, reminders for assignments. These are things that we can ask students to do themselves. So that's just something that when I mean, I've taught college level and I've taught graduate level. And even when I was a student, I would put reminders for assignments on my calendar. So those little ticklers on your calendar that say, hey, this assignment is due in 2 days, this assignment is due in 3 days, or this is when the assignment is due. As an instructor, I do the same thing. By the way, this assignment's coming in, so I need to plan my time to be able to grade that assignment. So giving them that as a strategy is just really effective. Avoiding the use of idioms, metaphors, sarcasm, and jokes. Such an important strategy because they will either not understand what you're saying or they'll take you very literally. And then that possibly paints you in a light that's not, because I mean, you were just using a metaphor. So I would strongly encourage you to stay away from idioms, metaphors, and sarcasm and jokes when engaging with individuals on the spectrum. If you do assign group work, which again, there's a lot of great things to do to assign group work, consider assigning group roles. So there is structure to that group work, or having them assign group roles and then following up and making sure those assignments were handed out and everyone knows their role and their position in the group. Supplement oral instructions with visual written instructions paired with graphics is always very helpful. And again, having those written instructions so it's something that they can go back to. With the college level, a lot of times we have our syllabus, but make sure your syllabus is something that has those written instructions in there for each of your assignments. So if they're not able to get in touch with you, they can see if you are available through a different mechanism, but also they're able to have those written instructions there in the syllabus. And then when speaking to a student, use their name so they know you're speaking directly to them. Again, as a mother of just teenage boys, I think this is just a good tactic for teachers across the board when you're speaking to the class and you're giving out assignments. And we talk, and right now I think many of us are in that parent teacher conference stage. If you have individuals in the K-12 system, using their name so you know, so they know you're speaking to them, so they know it applies to them is very important. And again, a great standard strategy for all students. So some tips for instructors. And these are just some fun things to think about as you're engaging with your students. Remember that you are the educational leader in the classroom. You set the precedent and the tone for the entire semester. So that's back to that setting those boundaries, setting those expectations, setting the routine, and also trying to steer away from that sarcasm, use of jokes, use of metaphors. Um, Students on the spectrum will respond to routine. And so having that routine, what you do throughout your day, especially if you're engaging with lab work, what are the lab days? What are the lecture days? How do those 2 days interchange and dovetail together? And then having that scaffolding or front loading of information can be helpful, especially with transitions. So laying out, this is what we're going to do today, just exactly as I did with you as we came into this webinar, or that if any of you are in meetings, it's nice to have an agenda, right? There's a lovely article that's been published recently about how if you don't have an agenda for a meeting, you should just delete the meeting off your calendar because it's not worth your time. I laugh a little bit at that because it depends on who you're dealing with and who set that meeting. But that scaffolding and front loading of information is so helpful for all individuals, but it's also helpful and essential for those individuals who are on the spectrum because it helps them really prepare and process for their day. Students with ASD might not ever ask for help. So take the initiative when the opportunity arises and say, what questions do you have? Or um, I often say, okay, I know you have a lot of questions, so let me know what those are. Or I'm going to pause right here and say, what questions, what are you thinking about? What are the things that are running around in your brain? Has this sparked any questions for you? Wording in a way that is not like, do you have any questions? Because that has that idea of you're supposed to, and more in that idea of that I would have questions if I was sitting in your position. So, how do I help you navigate this content? Because I know that, having that empathetic lens to requesting questions. And then find out how students prefer to communicate. Some communicate via email. Some do prefer having, paper copies. I'm not saying that you have to like print off and kill a tree or anything, but if that student needs that, knowing that and letting them know to make sure that they bring those with them at the college level and then the high school level, I think having those resources for them is very important. So some tips for day-to-day communication. I think it's important to be aware that each individual on the spectrum is unique. And I know I've said this already, but no two individuals will react exactly the same to a similar situation. So we have covered a lot of strategies and we have covered a lot of these are the strengths and these are the challenges, but understand that each individual on the spectrum is very unique and you're not going to just because you've had, I had Bill and Bill was on the spectrum. And so I've had a student, so I know exactly what to do. No, you don't, because each student is going to react differently. There are some gauging supports, which we've talked about, but you also want to be aware that, talk with that student, engage with that student and find out what works best for them. If an autistic person is doing something inappropriate, try to find out the reason why they're doing those actions. There is a great speaker that we recently had. His name is Dave Inglis, and he talks about the questions that you can ask to really help you navigate your day. And one of those is like, what made you say that? So instead of, and I use that a lot in my day to day. So instead of being like, okay, well, she said this and I think she meant that, but really diving into what made them say that, what was the reason for the action, why are you doing that? And then helping the individual understand whether it is appropriate or when it would be more appropriate to do whatever they're doing that you find inappropriate. Um, So, because what some may view as inappropriate behavior might be innocent curiosity, a lack of social skills, or an inability to communicate properly. Again, back to the defining those parameters of what is and what is not acceptable might prevent further problems. And I think with all students, but especially students on the spectrum, it is important to set those boundaries and outline those expectations. It'll be a more rewarding classroom experience for both sides if you do that. And then many people on the spectrum report being lonely, so their actions might be an attempt to get attention. And I think we see that a lot in especially in the high school level, because there is that it's not that class unit that we had in middle school or in elementary school. They're moving around, so they might not have that cohort that they're moving with. And then college is the same way. Like, do they have that sense of belonging as they're coming into your post-secondary institutions? And if not, are there ways in which the institution could have supports in place for them? So talking to your students and engaging with them is always good in this day and age, especially as we're moving out of the pandemic and into that idea of getting back to some new sense of normalcy. So I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions?
And Amy, while people are hopefully formulating some questions and typing those into the chat, I've been putting some links in the chat. So not only the link to our ATTA website, but our ICSPS website as well. I'm also going to pop in there a link to some universal design for learning resources that we had. Because as Amy mentioned, these strategies and the concept of UDL is very much applicable not only to individuals on the spectrum, but all students. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from the professional development that we do when we're talking about students in the classroom is that when you really look through that inclusive lens to support your students, it's then opening the door to support your entire classroom, right? You might think, oh, I can make this change or this tweak for this particular student, but you'll probably find that that tweak is going to be beneficial to a multitude of students within your classroom or your institution. And so I want to make sure that we're sharing those resources as well, because you might find some information that's useful to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Brittany. So as we talk about piggybacking off of what Brittany just said, those ideas that are useful and are universal design. So look at some common accommodations that can be given. These are all not things that take anything away from your curriculum. These are all things that really enhance the student's experience. And so again, thinking of these as an instructor, thinking of these as a student, these are things that would allow that flexibility and autonomy. So if this is something that you're saying, no, I don't want to do this, allow the students to know and put in your syllabus, they know that they can talk with student services and get accommodations for extended class time if they need that. Same with the private exam room. It's just something that if you're not comfortable as a professor or as a teacher allowing that, let them know that they can go to student services or they can go to student support and find and get that accommodation as well and do the paperwork and all that. The assigned note taker, that is something that they probably will need to go to student support or student services for, but it is very helpful if they need that. Ability to excuse themselves from class, that is something that is always good to talk with a student when they come into your classroom about. And one of the things that I like to do when I start a class is what are going to be the ground rules for the class? Because when you have a class and some people just need to stand up, some people just need to walk around. Some people are fidgeters. I am a leg bouncer. And so those are things like what are we going to allow? And then what are the things that they need to walk out of the class for? And I do that for just any class that I teach. Like what are our ground rules? What are our interaction rules? How are we going to handle our time together? And I think that's just a really great way to allow those students. And then if you do have a student that you know is on the spectrum, maybe make some time to meet with them and say, okay, when we talked about that, does this all work for you as well? Again, going back to that idea that they're not going to ask a lot of questions. So you want to be sure that you're having that engagement with them. The use of the laptop in class, that is more of a secondary thing than a post-secondary thing. I know at college, most everybody has their laptops open to take notes. Um, so I think that's something that you can really build on and again, allow for all your students to have. Computer for essay exams. I just in transparency, I was a history major and I can't even imagine what my grammar looked like writing those essays and those blue books that I wrote over and over and over again all through my undergrad and graduate work because now Grammarly lets me know when I miss a comma all the time. So allowing that is definitely a fantastic accommodation. And then the accommodations for group projects. And I think that I of acknowledging that not everyone is comfortable in a group setting. Also, I want you to think about it in this lens that we are here today talking about individuals on the spectrum, but at the same time, students who have anxiety or are dealing with anxiety, these accommodations also help them be more successful in your classroom. So to Brittany's point, it might not just be for your students on the spectrum and just things that can help all of our students. And our anxiety levels as a society coming out of the pandemic are quite a bit higher than they were going into the pandemic, or at least we're talking about them more. So having those accommodations for group projects, talking about who is following what role, what are the roles that are needed for the group to be successful, things of that nature, setting those parameters and strategies will really help not only your students, but also as an instructor, it helps you know what you're looking at and your grading stuff areas, sorry.
So Amy,
So ways you can, oh,
sorry, we did have a question in the chat from Scarlett, and they asked, would recording a lesson in a course be useful as well if they're not able to find a note taker, or do they need to find a note taker for that student?
Depends on the needs of the student. Every student is different. Um, I would say recording it and allowing it to be transcribed is a wonderful accommodation. But that's really at the discretion of what that student needs and what they're asking for. So my recommendation would be flexible, but also seek to know what the student needs. And I'm not saying like record every single lecture if that's not an accommodation that someone needs, but allowing a note taker or in that group work, allowing individuals. One of the things that we did in undergrad was we shared notes. That's not cheating. It's sharing notes saying, okay, do you have what are the things that you have in your notes? These are things that I have in my notes. Um, Looking at those and having that structured within the class is also very helpful. Or the other fun thing is giving them guidance on how to take notes. So, um, dare I say, study guide, but the idea of something that frames out what the lecture is going to be on and then gives them some guidance as to what are those things that they're going to need to be focusing on for the quiz, assessment, essay, whatever. Excellent. So ways to reassure students with ASD. So you see these really bold here. So rules, routine, and planning and prediction. So rather than have a fluid environment with an ASD student often relies on the rules to structure their activities. They thrive in a routine. So provide them that routine, provide them that structure, provide them the rules. This is what we do, this is what we do not do. Predictability and consistency are important. So um, any like that idea of flexibility that I'm just saying was a great idea for an instructor might not be something that they want to choose as a student. Um, Also, when looking at like group work, and I am very guilty of this, I give them options. It's universal design for learning at its best. I'm going to let you either present or you can sing or you can do a dance routine. I just need the content explained. If I have a student who is on the spectrum, I sit down with their group and we talk through what that's going to look like. So, like, what are those things? So then they more have a formula of what they're doing. They still get that autonomy to pick those, their expression of whatever they're wanting to do. So they have the multiple means of expression, but at the same time, for their group, they're going to stick to some guidelines, um, because it's allowing them to have that voice, but also helping them navigate that with a little bit more structure. And then surprises are stress inducing. And you'll also find that, especially for people who have anxiety, which often does couple with autism, you're going to have them worry about things that aren't even things that have happened yet. They're going to do that predicting and stress about it. So having that structure and letting them know that, nope, this is what we're going to do. This is going to be the routine. These are going to be the rules. And this is how we're going to go through the semester, um, is very just healthy for them. So some takeaways from today. And I think we've said this quite a bit. So all of your students will benefit from strategies. So it's not necessary to label anything as autism related. Just really look at what can we do to improve how our students engage. Remember, vague or or sugar-coated instructions can be problematic, and not being direct in your communication can be problematic. So be direct, be concise, tell them what they want. Not what they want, but what you want them to know. I will say one of the struggles for me is I try to be direct and then I feel like I'm being rude, but you're not being rude if you're helping the student understand what you're saying. So understand that just being vague and sugarcoating is not going to help them understand what they're doing correctly or doing incorrectly. So be direct as an instructor. That will help them thrive in your class. Most students with ASD are visual learners. Be sure to share information on multiple modalities. We've talked about this today quite a bit. Remember your UDL, multiple means of expression, make it visual. That just great idea of how do you help a student understand concepts within the sciences, within biology, within any of those things that have that idea of visualization. Very helpful to have just a key visual point as well. And then the takeaway, the other one that I hope you take away today is if you do have like a large assignment, this is going to be what we're going to be working on all semester. You break that assignment down into smaller increments and allow that student to know where they need to be by certain points in the semester, which will lead to success for all of your students. So we've talked about the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project. I do want to dive in because right now we're at the point where we are really launching into our webinar series. So we're going to be launching into what will be coming up. And I know Brittany's posted that link in the chat, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the topics that we have had and some of the topics that are coming up. So this is the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project. This is the website here. And then some of the topics that we've had all of these are recorded. So if you're tuning in for the first time, or if you are a loyal listener, all of these are recorded and you can go back and listen to them at any time. Also, the PowerPoints are available to you as well as any of the resources that were shared. So these are just a few that I've pulled out. The Language of Disability and the Inclusion Revolution was a fantastic presentation that was done by Hallie Moss, empowering the next generation of neurodiverse self-advocates, talking about the importance of self-advocacy for our students on the spectrum, online virtual spaces and resources for learners with ASD, looking at how to enhance your virtual space if you have a classroom, if you're teaching online, and a lot of people are in this day and age, especially as we go into winter. It's supposed to snow where I'm at today, so that's awful and wonderful all at the same time. But as we look at snow days are a thing of the past, and having those virtual spaces are really important. So that might be a great webinar for you to check out. Autism on the Job, Unpacking Neurodiversity at Work. So if I have any employers in the room, a great way to really talk about and look at what are some of the strengths for students who are neurodivergent, and then really looking at how to support your neurodivergent employees. 5, there's an overview of legal rights and responsibilities for autistic students and potential employers. That is a fantastic webinar, really talking about what are those legal rights and responsibilities of both the employers and the students. And then I don't think I have a 6 there, but it's Autism University's Lessons Learned Beyond the Classroom. So that's looking at what happens in post-secondary. Some more, again, we've been doing these for a while. So these are all just from last year, but I did want to share with you, and then we'll talk about what's coming this year. Freshman disorientation, so navigating college. If you are a student or have a student who's going to be going to college in the next year or 6 months, that's a fantastic webinar, really sharing what are those things to be looking at as you navigate college selection and then moving into college. Embracing values with people with autism in the workplace. Again, neurodivergent employees, great session. What reasonable accommodations look like in the workplace, again, for our employers. The session, We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation. That is by Eric Garcia. He wrote a fantastic book, We're Not Broken, and talking about really how we, as the rest of the society, can embrace individuals and understand individuals who are on the spectrum. And then Supporting the Social Chameleon, a discussion on autism masking. That again is Hallie Moss, talking about what that idea of social chameleons. As we are engaging with students, they sometimes tell us the things that they think we want to hear, and don't actually tell us what they're feeling. So how do we help them come out of their shell? And then the return on investment benefits of hiring talented autistic people in the workplace. Some of the speakers that we have featured, and that last one was Carrie Margot, was his session. So Eric Garcia, Hallie Moss, and Carrie Margot are all internationally or nationally known speakers on supporting and empowering individuals on the spectrum. And then I'm going to take you to our website here. And so this is what I hope you followed me. Brittany, did you follow me?
We sure did.
Excellent. So this is what our website looks like. And as you can see, we have different populations here that we serve. So secondary, students and young adults, post-secondary, employers, families, and communities. And if you go to any one of these, it will have a video that kind of walks you through, and you can share with your, any holiday. It's Halloween, talk to the kids about supporting students on the spectrum, but it talks about what are some provisions there and some ideas and really what the website's talking about. And then it goes back, and up here is our monthly webinar series. And so, as I said, they're all videotape, all not video. Oh my gosh, I'm showing my age there. They've all been recorded, and the presentations are available, as well as available resources. Coming up this further on into this year is Relentless Dreams, Goals, and Aspirations, which is November 14th. And then Confronting Organizational Ableism on December 12th. And Transitioning to College, Preparing Students with Autism to Navigate Post-Secondary Terrain. These are all new speakers coming in this year, really looking at not only advocating for, but how do we empower our individuals on the spectrum. And then other things I want to make you aware of is there's resources. There's also an autism conference that we are going to have on April 3rd in Bloomington Normal, and it is going to be a partnership between the A+ project and the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project. And there are several resources, which I'll go back to my, there we go. I'll go back to my slideshow here. So we have resources for secondary educators and counselors, students and young adults who are on the spectrum, post-secondary educators, post-secondary faculty, post-secondary student support services, communities, families, and employers are all have different resources that are available on that website. Some that I want to kind of share with you. There's interviewing tips. So looking at an opportunity that if a student is going to go on an interview, what are some tips that they should, read through, work with them on, do your homework, consider what will be like for this company, those kind of things. Communication in the workplace, that is a great resource that really talks about different ways in which communication will happen. And then check the number of most appropriately identifies with the correct answer, looking at how they can, it's that kind of that pre-work before they go on the job to help them navigate that on the job conversation. And then tips for faculty. What are some of the things you're going to see in your classroom similar to what we talked about today? And then also, what are those accommodations or modifications that can be made? In the work environment, this is a great work environment assessment. So if you have a student or know of a student or are a student who is looking to go into the workplace, what are some of the things that you could possibly encounter? And then, complete the assessment as the student engages and searches for employment, volunteer experience, and the 1, 2, 3, 4 is a never, tolerable on occasion, would be okay, doesn't bother me at all. So what are those things as you're looking at the workplace that you want to be aware of? So that is what we have for you today. And just want to pause there again for questions. So if you do have any questions, please visit the website. Brittany's put all those in the chat. And reach out. We are here to support and assist as individuals work to navigate this unique time for our students. And just want to thank you all for your time today.